I'm now going to give you our next speaker, Line Nybro Petersen, who will talk about conspiracy theories and misinformation surrounding the US presidential election. I think a fairly rich topic. Please, Line.
Thank you for that. And thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak to you today. I am currently the consortium manager of a European-funded research project called SMIDGE. The title is Social Media Narratives Addressing Extremism in Middle Age. And as such, I come at this at a slightly different angle because our focus is the spread of extremism on social media. In particular, we are interested in the age group between 45 to 65-year-olds. There's a lot of talk about how social media contributes to radicalization and spreading misinformation amongst young people, which is certainly important. We have a huge part of the population who are very active users of social media in their daily lives, both as sources of entertainment and through their work. There are also a group of people who are, as evident by the people in this room, without making any sort of assumptions on your age, are also people who are culturally and politically influential in their local communities. So we are particularly interested in that age group. I'm not going to say a lot about that, except to sort of frame the work that we're doing in our research project. The project started in March of 2023, and we are just over halfway through this research. And what I'll be introducing to you today are some of the preliminary findings and results that are coming out of this research. It's a collaboration between 8 partner institutions spread across Europe, and outside of Europe, we have colleagues working in Kosovo at a security center. We have colleagues in the UK, in Cyprus, in Belgium, in Austria, and Italy. So I am an associate professor in media studies at the University of Copenhagen. So my research background is in media studies, and that is the main focus of the work that I'll be introducing to you today. This is also work that I've done with my colleague, Mikkel Bækby Johansen, who is a postdoc in this project, and we have built this theoretical framework that I'm presenting to you in a minute together. So as our research project started, we noticed this tendency on social media platforms that stood out to us and that we have come to call hybridization. And we call it that because we're not the only one who noticed that particular trend. But it's a trend that seems to capture how there is a fragmentation or a hybridization of extremist narratives on social media. It's also a tendency that was noticed by the Danish National Security Agency, and they also labeled this trend hybridization. So in a lot of the ongoing research, in a lot of the international threat assessment reports, there's this constant focus of there's something going on social media that contributes to the current environment in extremist communities, but they don't take seriously the role of social media in these environments. So there's a theoretical gap here that we set out to then see, can we understand what social media platforms themselves, what role they play in developing these environments. So PET, for example, labels this process of hybridization as a process in which the mixing of different ideologies, worldviews, or communities leads to the creation of new extremist narratives and modus operandi among individuals, groups, or communities. So one of the things that becomes very clear when we look at incidents of lone actor terrorism, of mass shooters in the US, but also in Europe, we can see that their ideological position is not as clear-cut as it may have been at one point. They're not either extreme left or extreme right. Rather, it's sort of a composition of all of these different ideas and grievances that come together in these online environments in which they are active. So they may believe in a right-wing conspiracy theory such as the Great Replacement, but they're also really curious about chemtrails, and there's something about the anti-vaxxer movement that's also attracted, and big pharma that's attracted their attention. So it's this new mix of ideological grievances. Other researchers have labeled this composite violent extremism. They talk about an amalgamation of disparate beliefs, this coming together of these unlikely ideological new structures. In a Danish context, in connection to the lockdowns during COVID, we could see how certain groups from sort of more vegan, yogi communities came together around conspiracy theories that then connected to far-right movements, which are two sort of ideological positions that would normally not be linked. In the UK terrorism efforts talks about mixed, unstable, and unclear motivations for committing extremist violence. In the US, we talk about, the FBI talks about salad bar extremism, fused extremism, fringe fluidity, and other types of phrases. So there's a lot of conceptual work going on in this field, and we are trying to sort of then bring into it by bringing in a new concept, this idea and this importance of social media for these trends and tendencies. So here I have a picture of someone you might remember have been on the news in the recent US election. He was the second attempted assassinator of Donald Trump. He hit at Donald Trump's golf club with a rifle. And he is interesting because he had, in opposition to the first assassination attempt, this guy had an online profile that people could then go into and see the things that he had been expressing on his different social media profiles. And what became clear was that there wasn't really a very sharp ideological position that motivated this attack. He seems to have been all over the ideological spectrum in recent years. So he could be someone we could talk about as part of this hybridization trend. So in order to understand this trend, we've come up with our own concept. We call it hybridized prefatory extremist spaces, or HYPE, which is what I'll be referring to it as going forward. And the reason we're interested in this is that while not all conspiracy theories and not all misinformation leads to extremism, all extremism has an element of conspiracy theories and misinformation. So that's our interest in the relationship between those different elements. Now we talk about prefatory extremism, and that is important because we're not trying to say that everyone engaged in a conspiracy theory online or in misinformation online are extremist or will ever become extremist. But these are, in a sense, online cultures, online practices, online communities that people dip in and out of. We can join something and be very interested in what happened to Kate Middleton in the spring when she disappeared from the public and engage ourselves in conspiracy theories about that. And then we can return to our normal non-conspiratorial lives and go on with business as usual. Or we may be captured by the practices in that particular community, and we might sort of go deeper into the rabbit hole, as it were. So these are communities, the communities we're researching here are communities that may not ever become extremist, but that some of them have sort of an internal structure, and we can talk about that, that lends itself really well to extremist movements and then presents the opportunity for lone wolf actors to act in extremist ways. So one of the things that we have identified is that this is not just a fragmented display of ideology. The level of hybridization is not just based on content. It's also, as Morten pointed out too, that there's it's also a question of a technological hybridity, that we have the availability of taking hyperlinks from one platform and share it on another platform. Something on TikTok can suddenly trend on Instagram. We can also have several profiles on each platform, anonymous profiles, all of that. it's also an aesthetic hybridity, which means that we can use multimodal tools at our disposal, just on our phones, to post videos, to post GIFs, reaction videos, short form videos, memes, all these different types of content that comes into play in these narratives. And this is a meme that is that some might recognize as a meme where it's just a brain that sort of collapses into a galaxy brain, usual. But here it's Alex Jones, who runs Infowars, or ran Infowars until very recently, a channel that is focused on spreading misinformation to the highest degree, and has made that his business model. Finally, it's also a hybridity of digital spaces. And by that, I mean that when we are on social media, we're actually part of several different types of communities at the same time. We're both there as users who are looking to be entertained while we're waiting for the bus. We're also playing with our friends. We are following politicians to get new updates about their insights in the society that we live in. We're following news outlets for the same thing. And so there are all of these different genres or practices that come into play in the exact same spaces. Where we are playing, the same place we're playing our games is where we are coming across political information about the upcoming election. So hype spaces for us are both publics, they're platform dependent, they're participatory, and they're multimodal or aesthetic practices. And that puts us at that poses a particular challenge for us, because we can fact check things that are communicated to us as if it was part of an election information campaign. But if it's part of a playful community and of users having fun, then that becomes far more difficult, or does it even make sense to fact check it, because the facts are not the point of the activity. This meme here is a meme that's part of a community called QAnon, Pastel QAnon, in which users, particularly women users on Instagram, has sort of made the QAnon conspiracy theory that I'm guessing a lot of you here will be familiar with, into this aesthetic Instagram practice of pastel colors, balloons, candles. I'm reading a book, I'm drinking my latte, and then I'm also serving up these conspiracy theories in that context. So for these hype spaces, we have identified 3 entry points, or 3 main domains that we can see on social media. The first domain is influencers. The second domain is communities, and the third domain is memetics. And we understand memetics as a practice that goes beyond just the traditional meme of an image and a piece of text, but as something that is practiced as this sort of repetition of something that evolves into something else. TikTok is, in a sense, a memetic platform. It's about It's about capturing a trend and then moving with that trend using the same sound to pose new images. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the preliminary findings that we have from our research project. And this is work that we've done with our Austrian partners. I'm going to take this one first, because we wanted to look at memetic practices on social media. So we looked at different platforms to figure out which platform presents a great repository of memetic material. And Instagram, as an image-based platform, was particularly useful for that. So we identified 6 hashtags that all connects specifically to different conspiracy theories. When we initially did this, we actually identified 10 hashtags, but by the time we were ready to pull the data, 4 of those hashtags had been moderated away by the platform. So that shows us that there is this constant sort of work to eliminate the presence of these hashtags by the platforms themselves. But as you'll see, that doesn't really solve the problem. Another thing that this shows is that this hashtags here, you can see that there's a lot of emojis attached to that. And that's because if you just search for this slogan, where we go one, we go all, which is a QAnon slogan, that will not be searchable. So users work around that by then misspelling or putting up emojis so they can still have that hashtag be viable and shared with like-minded people. Oh, let me go back again. There we go. So all of these hashtags, and this was important for the study that we were doing, are quite meme heavy. It's not exclusively memes, but there's a lot of memes, as you can see here. This is the hashtag, the Great Replacement, and you can see a lot of the posts in that. Particular hashtags are memes. Another thing that we understood was that searching straight up for things that related to misinformation or to conspiracy theories would not provide any results on a platform like Instagram. It sends us on to WHO, it sends us different places. So in that sense, there are already these efforts to not have people come across all of this misinformation content. Let's see how that works. This is one of the ways in which users navigate that moderation effort by Instagram, is simply by making several other related hashtags that aren't the one that has been shadow banned or removed by the platform, but they can just set up, like all of these relates to the same. The Great Awakening is sort of the core of it, and then there are all of these variations and many, many more. This is just a screenshot of some of them. Another thing that we could see in our data set was that under each memes, there was this cluster of hashtags. So when you post a meme on Instagram, you don't just have a single hashtag, but you put up this cluster of hashtags to make sure that a lot of audiences come across your particular post. And what that shows us is how some of the technological or the digital infrastructure on a platform like Instagram is affords this hybridization trend that I've been talking about, these hive spaces. Because in this data set, we could see again and again how these memes were connected to a range of grievances, a range of ideas, and different types of extremist narratives and conspiracy theories. So these are from two different posts, but you can see just the first one connects to Klaus Schwab, WEF, Hunter Biden's laptop, something about Robert Kennedy Jr., Infowars, China, booster shots, all kinds of different things that come in together, because as users on Instagram, it's very useful to put many hashtags so that we can capture larger audiences. So we pulled the data from this network of hashtags to see how this data appeared on Instagram. So these are just the 6 hashtags, and each year represents new posts. So this is an accumulation we're looking at, but each year represents how many new posts with these 6 hashtags were posted on Instagram. So in 2021, we had about just under 7,000 posts, and then that number just grows. So in 2023, we had 25,000 posts with these 6 hashtags on them. So while Instagram's moderations efforts are certainly notable and commendable for taking away some of the hashtags we had initially identified, this is still a problem that sort of just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And you can't go through 25,000 memes and fact check those memes. So we have a particular challenge here. So in this network analysis, we were also interested in how these different hashtags connected to each other underneath these posts. The gray lines here are lines that those are the initial hashtags that we went in to search for. And then we ended up with a network of 1,100 hashtags that connected to each other at least 100 times each. And one of the things that we can see is that a lot of this content flows into the mainstream flow of Instagram because it connects to hashtags like #funny, #weekend, #pick of the day, and all of these other practices that users not engaged in conspiracy theory communities may follow on the platform. So it becomes part of the mainstream flow of users on Instagram. This is the total network analysis, and you won't be able to sort of identify, but we have these different topical clusters that appeared in our data set. Notably, this also connects to popular culture a great deal. One of the top 50 used hashtags was Jungkook. And those of you who are familiar with K-pop will recognize that artist because he is a K-pop artist who is believed by fans to be the reincarnation of Princess Diana. He was born the day after she died. They have the same smile. There's something about his sweater, all of these ideas. And that tells you something about the type of practices that are going on on a platform like Instagram. And I'll say more about that now. Because popular culture plays a great deal in how these sort of practices and of misinformation and conspiracy theories are unfolded on a platform like Instagram, but on social media platforms as a whole. Perhaps you remember Donald Trump, the stories about Donald Trump posting this meme on his platform Truth Social, an AI image of Taylor Swift allegedly supporting Donald Trump. It was a meme that was made, or an image that was made by a group of fans, Taylor Swift fans, who call themselves Swifties for Trump. And they have their own platform on TikTok and on Twitter and elsewhere. And then Donald Trump dove right in and posted this image on his own social media profile. So there's something interesting about how popular culture is constantly used as a reference point in a lot of these hype spaces, these hype communities. On the flip side, there was a group of fans called Swifties for Kamala, who also were operating in a similar fashion on social media, even before Taylor Swift had to announce that she supported Kamala in order to debunk some of the misinformation about her that was already circulating as part of the election. I'll return to Taylor Swift in a minute because this was not the only time misinformation related to her came up in the current in the election that we just had in the US. Here's another way in which hype memetics may look. This is a post posted by Donald Trump Jr. on X, a screenshot apparently of Biden's phone. He apparently has a picture of himself on his phone, and a lot of missed calls by President Zelensky, who's panicking about getting funding for the war in Ukraine. Now, obviously, this is a fabricated image, and I think a lot of people who came across it will understand that this is fabricated. But for people who support Donald Trump, it'll be funny. This is still a humorous, entertaining image about a topic that interests a lot of people at the moment. And I don't know if you're able to see this, but 21 million profiles or users on Twitter has come across this particular image. So the spread is enormous. But it also tells us something about, and this is what I keep returning to, is that the point of spreading misinformation isn't necessarily about spreading misinformation. It's also about being funny and clever and entertaining and drawing in engagement and audiences. There's a logic about what we're doing on social media that has to do with playfulness rather than I'm trying to spread this as information. I don't necessarily believe that Donald Trump Jr. post this particular image to spread misinformation, but that he finds it, as he says, it's for the lulz. It's to be funny. In the current election in the US, we had these two assassination attempts on Donald Trump. And the first attempt back in the summer was the source of a lot of conspiracy theories. So in the minutes after the attempt, conspiracy theories had already started on social media. And these conspiracy theories came from both sides of the political spectrum. So Donald Trump supporters felt that the assassination attempt was an event staged by the Biden administration to eliminate Donald Trump. This was Biden's collaboration with intelligence services so that he could remove the threat of Donald Trump. And on the other side of the aisle, Biden supporters felt that this was all staged by Donald Trump himself to get attention and to get ahead in the present election. So here we see a lot of some of the memes that came out of that event. Make no mistake, they didn't fail to protect him, they failed to kill him, suggesting that there is an intelligence operation that attempted to assassinate Donald Trump to get rid of him as a presidential candidate. So that's one of the ways in which misinformation is served to us as a mimetic practice. And again, we can see how users draw on popular culture references to get their point across. Here is a screenshot from The Matrix that's been photoshopped with Donald Trump's face of Donald Trump dodging bullets. And then I'm pretty sure this is also how they see themselves, but we'll leave that for another day. On the flip side, the memes were also quite present. People were arguing whether or not he was even hit. And this thing about him just turning his head led to a lot of speculations. There were all of these analyses of the outlay of the place where he was giving his rally. Could the shooter have been located on that particular roof? And people were drawing lines and all of these kind of investigative efforts. People were suggesting that it was all fake and that was really just sort of theater blood that he was using. This is a meme that followed the debate with Kamala that came a couple of weeks later or a month later, where he was wearing a pad on his, no, it was at the GOP convention, and he was wearing a pad on his ear, and a lot of GOP supporters also had this little pad on their ear, and so that led to memes along these lines. And that points us toward some of the practices that happens in hype communities. Because what we can see again and again, and which part of this these mimetic practices also engage with, is what we label forensic play. It's an interpretive strategy that are used by a lot of users on social media, from fan communities to open source intelligent communities, but also very present in conspiracy theory communities. Forensic play is a term that we have borrowed from fan studies researchers Jason Mittell. He talks about forensic fandom, but it's actually today a much broader tendency where users on social media are picking up everything in current events and looking at it as if it's a clue to a mystery they need to solve. In this particular setting, all of us get to be online sleuths, with our own little mystery that we have identified with a collective group of people, and now we are collaborating to disclose these secrets, find the truth. And Mittell says about this type of work, he says, such ludic narrative logic and transmedia storytelling promote a model of forensic fandom, a mode of television engagement encouraging research, collaboration, analysis, and interpretation. Except it's not just fandom or fans of television shows anymore. It's all of us on social media a lot of the time. And some of us may not engage in it ourselves, but we watch it and we follow along in today's installment of the newest clues that has been identified and analyzed. So this was a conspiracy about Kamala Harris following the debate because she knew all the answers to the question. So certainly someone had fed her the answers in her little earpiece, which then was her earring here is accused of being an actual earpiece. Similarly, the assassination was the source of a lot of forensic play these investigative efforts by users. You see a recurring feature is the errors that you can make on your phone on a picture and then you post it as if that leaves some sort of evidence for what is going on. Here's another one that attempts to say something about the placement of the shooter and why he was not stopped by the security people at the spot. So hype communities are to a large degree shaped by this practice of forensic play. People are, instead of watching the latest crime mystery on HBO, engaged in their own form of detective play on social media. It's a source of entertainment that it is not difficult to see why this is fun and engaging, but it also contributes to the collaborative building of conspiracy theories in these realms. It builds community, and there's sort of this returning playfulness you can return to. And that brings us back to another conspiracy theory about Taylor Swift, because way back when, just after the primaries, Taylor Swift started to date Travis Kelce, a famous football actor, a famous football player. And that became part of conspiracy theory, that she did that as part of a CIA psychological operation, because she would then be present at the Super Bowl and announce her support for Joe Biden, who was the candidate at the time. That was a huge conspiracy theory that spread not only on social media, but became part of the coverage on different mainstream news challenges, amongst others, Fox News, of course. Finally, I'm going to say a little bit about hype influencers, because Morten pointed this out as well. There's this tendency for some of these actors to be what we would label influencers in this digital market. And they operate by some of the same logic as if they were influencers related to fashion or beauty or everyday life, family life, all of these other things, except these influencers are driving their content by spreading conspiracy theories. This summer, there was a case in which a group of far-right influencers, amongst them is Tim Pool, who you see here. It was revealed that the network Tenet Media that they were working for, that was the agency that had them in-house, was actually funded by Russian actors. And I'm not sure how effectful that strategy was, except that it certainly brought about a lot of distrust in influencers like Tim Pool to know that they could be funded by Russia. But one of the things they did do, these actors who funded Tenet Media with millions and millions of dollars, is that they suggested content that the influencers could engage in. So they suggested that they could maybe post something about why Ukraine was acting in a not so productive way in the war, why Russia's strategy was better, all of these things. And actually, some of that did come to bear on these platforms. As with the data from the Instagram set, where we saw conspiracy theories go into the mainstream flow of social media content, we can also see how some of these influencers that come out of fringe platforms like Rumble, Gab, Truth Social, and other places become part of the mainstream. One such actor was influencer Laura Loomer, who became friendly with the president as part of his campaign in the past month or so. She followed him on the campaign trails. He was with him at Mar-a-Lago. She was standing side by side. He addressed her at his rallies on several occasions. Laura Loomer was the one who, before Trump said it at the debate, said on her platform here on Rumble, which is a sort of a unmoderated YouTube platform, that people from Haiti out of Ohio were eating their pets. She made that suggestion. And then only days or weeks later, Donald Trump repeated it on a national stage. And we can see Laura Loomer has her own TV show called Loomer Unleashed. And she has this understanding of herself as an investigative journalism. She takes on this role that is part sort of investigative journalism, part John Oliver commenting on current events, but from a far-right point of view. So she's part stand-up, she's part news person. There's this collapse, hybridity of genres in the work that she's doing. But here we can see her referencing this exact conspiracy theory that relates to the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, where she talks about the immigration catastrophe, and she has behind her an image of a very adorable internet cat. So there's again this mix of misinformation, of conspiracy theories, but it's delivered to us as a form of entertainment. It's humorous. But what we have been talking about here is these hype spaces, and I started out by saying that these are prefatory extremist spaces. They may never evolve into actual extremism. But this is a screenshot from just part of the comment section on a Laura Loomer video. And people are saying, these people are sick, they're support of Trump Vance. I'm ready to kill all cartel members. They need to be exterminated. And these type of sentiments are not rare in these communities. And this is where we might see sort of it stops being prefatory and is now just straight up extremism in which an in-group considers it important for their own survival to extinguish or to exterminate an out-group, which is what is present here. So during the recent election, we saw this mainstreaming of hype influencers from fringe platforms, but there's also just been a mainstreaming of conspiracism as a way of having communication, discussions about the political environment. And Joe Rogan is one of the people that we consider a hype influencer. Joe Rogan is notably, until very recently, he did not have an explicit political support. He didn't give his political support to a candidate until just, I think, a week before the election, where he threw his support at Donald Trump, who was also the only of the candidates to show up on his show. But what Joe Rogan does instead is that he will invite anyone into his studio. So anything from presidents or high-ranking politicians, Bernie Sanders has been on there as well. He will have people coming in presenting wild conspiracy theories in the same format, in the same genre as the interview with high-ranking political figures. Joe Rogan is immensely popular and watched by a lot of million of people. By the time I took this screenshot, we can see 50 million views for the interview with Donald Trump. So again, there's this mainstreaming of conspiracy theory ideas that become part of the digital environment on platforms like, well, this is just from YouTube, so mainstream platforms as well. I found this meme, and I thought it would be good to close up. Which is just to say that a lot of the misinformation that we detect out there, a lot of the conspiracy theories that grow out of social media are there as a consequence of people looking for entertainment. We're not watching Flow TV anymore. We're going on social media for endless scrolling and for posting funny memes and engaging in communities where we can be part of an environment that is highly entertaining and makes us laugh. And so we end up here in this place. So what we have attempted to do is to call attention to the distinct role of social media in this spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories, and in this context of the US election as it's just unfolded. And going forward, we want to map these different environments and look deeper into the ways in which these practices then shape communities that can then lead to the spread of extremism or radicalization on these platforms. As part of the SMITCH project, we are also working to build tools to educate people in politics, journalists, educators, and others. And so if you're interested in being part of that and giving us input on the type of material you would need for your particular group, feel free to reach out and I'll put you in touch with some of our colleagues working on developing educational material. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Line Nybro Petersen, for a very interesting presentation. We have time for 2 questions. So if there are any questions from the audience, I'm sure that Line will be happy to take them. Again, there's a microphone going around if you need it. Well, in that case, I think I will ask the first question. So I thought the network analysis you had done was very interesting, especially the way that these extremist hashtags were connected to, I guess, the most common sort of mainstream hashtags. And one thing I was wondering is if you ever looked into how well the extremist hashtag content performed compared to the other stuff that's on the sort of mainstream big hashtags.
Yeah, not very well. So a lot of the posts that we're looking at had 5 likes. Or something around 5 likes. They don't get a lot of likes usually. There are some influencers, hype influencers on Instagram that have accounts that will draw a lot of engagement, but a lot of users were just posting and posting and posting into the blind. There was really no one watching them. But what we did see was that there are then thousands and thousands and thousands of posts. So the sort of the impact comes in the number of posts and not in the engagement itself.
That is both relieving and troubling. So
yes.
Thanks for the answer. So the next question is from Mikko.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mikko Sal from Faktabari. As you are the, let's say, the research representative in our event, so the access to the data of which you are working on, what's the situation at the moment for you and for like your Nordic colleagues? I am very worried because I really don't trust the numbers that they are giving. We had a couple of examples where it's not possible to have this type of outreach for campaigns then and all that. And if we are basing our research on what has went viral, so what do we really know about that one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the big challenge is that after having some years where social media platforms were pressured to open their API to researchers, we're now seeing more and more close those APIs again. X is, of course, a big one. When Musk took over X, that opportunity disappeared, or it became very difficult to collect data from those platforms. I'm not a data scientist, so I ask the questions and then I have my colleagues who can then collect the data. But the way I understand it is that they use tools that are outside of the platform's own software, and so in that sense, I trust the data that they have collected for us here, but it makes it very difficult, and I think that needs to be part of the debate. It's a debate that we keep sort of tiptoeing around, is regulation of these platforms, and one requirement to operate a social media platform should be that it should leave its data available for the public, so researchers and others can look at what is actually going on. And for some reason that has not been. I know that there are efforts and attempts to do that, but they're still kind of going around finding ways to not allow us in to look at that. Facebook is another platform. It's really difficult to collect big data sets. Yeah, so that's a huge challenge, and it has to do that also is why we ended up looking at Instagram, because certainly Twitter has a lot of memes as well. Twitter isn't as hashtag based as Instagram is, so we would have find some different results, and for that reason Instagram was a good platform to look at this, but it was one of the places we could go to find data, so that's what we did.